Well, it's only fitting that my last day of school here in June 2014 should be here at the Esplanade during the Kaleidoscope of Arts put on by Prairie Rose School Division. So if you're interested on the reflections of a retiring teacher, here's a story for you. I had a choice to make when I was 18, living just outside Toronto. It was either go west, young man, like many people did, or take 6 months and go to Europe. A friend and I decided to put our thumbs out on Highway 1 and wound up in Calgary. The choice had been made. Once here, it became evident that I needed to get some education. This meant 2 years at Mount Royal College and then followed by 3 at the University of Lethbridge, finishing off with my education degree. I added a master's degree in 1990 from Gonzaga University. Now, when I went to university, I had no idea what I was going to take, but the U of L had a well-known and respected education department. So, without any other ideas about what to take, it was education by default. My first teaching job was in Warner, Alberta. After 1 year, it was off to Ralston School for the next 23 years, and finishing with 9 years as the AC Curriculum Technology Lead at the Prairie Rose School Division office. I was fortunate to get my first job at Warner School, where I had John Moserchuk as my first principal. He was a great role model, and I learned many lessons that were to influence me throughout my career. He was a man that never compromised or did the politically correct thing. He did what he felt was best for the school, students, but most of all for his teachers. He was a disciplinarian, that's for sure, but always with a sense of fairness. I remember seeing him talking with a parent because it was his son who was doing donuts in the playground with his truck. John was going to make sure that she understood this wasn't acceptable. If John saw a student in the hallway, he made sure that student understood that this wasn't the place he wanted to see them again. I remember being in school one Sunday and John was there as usual. He seemed to live in the school. It was just after the teaching convention in February. He asked me how I liked the sessions. Fine, I said, and of course I asked him. He said he didn't mind it, but he was getting tired of listening to speakers that hinted we teachers didn't love students enough. Of course we did, and he found it offensive for speakers to mention this. Here was this strict, carry-a-big-stick principal who was talking about loving his students. That conversation stuck with me throughout my career. I always enjoyed working at Warner School with Mr. Otani, Mr. Jepp, Mrs. Lagler, and Mrs. Grasspointer. Your first class is one any teacher remembers, and this one was special in Warner School. There were just 17 students in the class. This grade 5 class scored 99 percentile on the CTBS as a class. I was too naive a teacher at the time to understand that I would never see a class like this again. The first year had to be one of the most rewarding teaching careers. We learned chess and backgammon and a few magic tricks. We did lots of learning center work as this was where the pendulum was during the early 1980s. We had drama plays, haunted houses, dinner theaters to work on. In between, we managed to get the curriculum taught. One of the highlights of my career was being asked to be the guest speaker at their grade 12 graduation. They felt that I taught them many things, but as usual, I learned more lessons from them than they did. I won't mention any names here, but here's a picture of that first class. All 17 hold a special memory, and I can name every one of them to this day. After 1 year in Warner, it was off to Ralston School. Ralston School was home for the next 23 years. The first 10 years as a grade 5 and physical education teacher, which included 5 years as the vice principal, followed by 12 years as the principal. It was a busy time for those years and included many weekends and evenings coaching volleyball, badminton, wrestling, and track. I counted 1 year that between sports and camping trips, it worked out to be 17 Saturdays. I never got tired of watching kids play sports, and during those years, I had many provincial champions in badminton and wrestling. The badminton team during its heyday won many trophies and awards. I remember 1 year the Brooks Tournament, which, in its time, was considered the Southern Alberta Championships. There were 15 categories, 5 in each grade, 7, 8, and 9, and all the draws had 16 entries. That weekend, Ralston won 10 gold, 3 silver, and 1 bronze. The team was shut out in one category. The wrestling team had provincial champs and many tournament winners. One year, 5 wrestlers went to the Alberta Winter Games. They won 3 medals. Many wrestlers went on to high school and university programs. I remember going to the Medicine Hat School, practice, to help out one year. There were 22 wrestlers on the team, and 12 of them came from little old Ralston School. On more than one occasion, a student might find himself playing badminton at the Royal Glenora Club and then wrestling in the afternoon over at St. Cecilia Junior High. I would like to take credit for many of the athletic accomplishments, but most evenings you would find the students from 5 o'clock on working out and playing at the Ralston gym. There were many outdoor trips. The grade 6s always went to Elkwater, where there was always a ghost story or two to tell. The junior highs went on 3-day trips, canoeing on the Red Deer, usually from Brooks to Jenner, backpacking in Kananaskis and Banff, various cycling trips, and rock climbing trips to the Big Rock in Okotoks or on the Washatu Cliffs in Kananaskis. If a trip like this wasn't physically challenging, I wondered what was the point. Yes, we did see a few bears on the trails, and we also needed to stand by the fire to stay warm on top of Crip Lake in Waterton one afternoon. We were also late for a river takeout, a day late one time, and the Army rescued us the next day. We would take garbage bags up to slide down the snowfields on the backside of Cameron Lake and ponchos to wear underneath the waterfalls. There were 15K hikes in the mountains and overnight stays in wilderness campgrounds in Waterton and Kananaskis in the backcountry. Insurance companies now tell us using a bouncy castle is too dangerous and not allowed at school activities. They would have a fit today if any of these activities were even whispered about, and yet, somehow we all survived. Many of the students learned lifelong skills, not least of which was to learn to respect and appreciate nature. There were many that helped with a lot of these trips. Parents mostly, and the military would send some of their men along. One time, Base Commander Colonel Brown came with us, and I put him in charge of the 15-kilometer day hikes. I think after 3 days, he had had enough. I had many parents that helped, but in particular, Phil Crawford always stepped up to help, whether it was the Crip Lake or the Carthew-Cameron Lake hike, not to mention all the 4 to 6 camps he helped with. What else do I remember? The field trips, the intramural events, and maybe the most famous or infamous activity, the haunted house where Herman lived in the Ralston School basement. There were spring teas, drama plays, dinner theaters, talent contests, penny carnivals, Christmas concerts, spring concerts, junior high dances, graduation exercises, science fairs, Remembrance Day ceremonies, and 100 other activities. Maybe most notable was helping to organize the Cypress School Division track meet that often happened out at Ralston because we had the best track facility. For many years, 350 athletes would show up with all the teachers from the division there. If students remember one activity that we always did at the school for years, it was the intramural baseball. Every spring, staff and students would participate in the 4-week tournament. Of course, my team was always named the Blue Jays. Now, this was serious intramurals, and I remember Mr. O'Neill, after a particularly trying game, refusing to ever umpire again. It was always fun, that is, if the Blue Jays won the championship. I was hard to get along with if I had bragging rights for a year. One of the most rewarding aspects of being at Ralston was working with the military. The Army, whether British or Canadian, always supported the school. It could be helping to build a playground, providing food for a campout, making available busing, or providing suppers through the mess. Perhaps the most rewarding relationship with military and BATIS was the opportunity to work with Service Children's Education, the organization that overlooked British military student education. This meant visiting back and forth with many visitors coming here, and myself and other teachers and staff members having the chance to visit British schools in Europe. This relationship also led to the teacher exchange between Prairie Rose and SCE teachers. I remember being in a meeting in the office when the CEO of Children's Education, Ian Mitchelson, proposed the exchange. Marilyn Skoda was the first Prairie Rose teacher to take advantage of the program and lived in Krefeld, Germany for 2 years. We had many excellent British ECS teachers at Ralston School that have taught in the SCE system. There was Jan Newell, Carrie Tacey, Sue Nichols, and Frau Speckles while I was at the school. This program also saw 10 other Prairie Rose teachers making the trip across the pond for a year. I was fortunate to be able to take advantage of this program and spent a year teaching with SCE in Germany. I met many professional colleagues and became friends with many SCE personnel over the 15-year relationship. Mike Chislett, Diana Batt, Graham Marsh, and Tim Nichols were also friends and professional connections that I appreciated during my time with Ralston School. Most of all, my working relationship with Bill Collar, the IT person of SCE. Bill visited Ralston School and took me under his wing with his wife Denise when we went to live in Rheindahlen in Germany. That was another highlight. I worked as an ICT consultant to various schools in Germany. We lived in JHQ for a year, which is near Dusseldorf, Germany. This allowed me to travel to 14 countries that year. We got to go 20 minutes down the road and have lunch in Holland or 30 minutes to Belgium for supper. It was one adventure after another. There were also activities that went beyond school in the school division. The Festival of Voices was held for 3 years. It was introduced to me by a Diana Batt, who was with Service Children's Education in Germany at the time. Typically, there would be 800 students, 20 school choirs performing for an audience of 1,000 people at the Cypress Center. For 6 years, the school sponsored the art festival. The first year had 40 acts and 2,500 spectators spread out over 6 venue sites located throughout Ralston. For a couple of years, we had the Lord Strathcona Horse Troupe from Edmonton show up and perform on our soccer field. For 5 years, we sponsored the Science Exposition. For 3 days, we rented the Travelodge Convention Room and had 1,200 students show up to see science displays. Probably the most popular session was the reptile show. There were snakes everywhere, with the boa being the most popular attraction. Perfect. These programs would have never been a success without the help of Shauna Barth, Greg Martin, or Kelly Taylor, who at the time was the Parent Council President. I was awarded with the Alberta Teacher PR Association Award 1 year for organizing these activities. The last 9 years have been in division office working with teachers and students in technology. I've been fortunate to work with my partner in 9 years, Linda Matsumoto, who always made sure my schedule was full. I enjoyed the camaraderie with Tech Gang, Wayne, Mike, Caleb, Krista, and Bill. I have tremendous respect and admiration for Lyle Roberts, who is the IT director. No humbler or dedicated IT person have I met. It was rewarding to work with teachers on tech areas like smartboards, Web 2.0, iPads, video and podcasting activities, to name a few. I was always in awe of the teachers that learned small things from me and developed them into tremendous activities for their classrooms. Seeing this creativity in teachers was also something that inspired me. It was a natural lead-in to organize the Teacher-to-Teacher Technology Conference for 7 years. It would not have been possible to do this without the incredible work of the Senator Gershaw staff. In particular, my 2 co-chairs, Derek Beck and Don Schmidt. No way would this have been pulled off without the 3 of us contributing to its success. It was through the conference that I met many of the leading educational technology experts in North America. The professional relationships I had during the years with staff resulted in making work a place I wanted to go to every day. I worked with teacher aides that could easily have been excellent teachers but lacked a piece of paper. Linda Pack, Sandy Crawford, Lori Romaine, Hazel Carter, Finney Hansen, Gail Williston, Michelle McHugh, Kilda Butler, and if I have forgotten a few others, sorry, but there were so many that contributed to making Ralston School a great place to work. Reg Thane was the principal when I came to Ralston until he retired in 1992. Reg was a great principal to work for. He never seemed to lose his cool. I guess he learned that from the war. I remember him coming into the staff room one year and just pointing up and saying, "I was there." Well, After a few seconds and being June 6th, I realized he was talking about D-Day. Reg had been a pilot, not just any pilot, but a Pathfinder pilot for the RAF. He said he could remember looking down and seeing the D-Day Armada as it headed for the French coast that day. Reg never said no to me, no matter how crazy a plan I came up with. This was a great working relationship, and I later became the vice principal under Reg. Barry Onslow was the best math teacher I ever worked with. He was also the vice principal when I first arrived at Ralston School. Teresa Danino was the best science teacher who never gave up on a student. If they didn't learn something, she figured it was something she was doing wrong. Lyle Roberts was the best French teacher and computer teacher, and Marilee was the best by far for language arts. Long-term and excellent teachers and friends included Diane Kissinger, Marilyn Skoda, Sam Montoya, Lyle Roberts, Tim Gruber, Stan Nygam, Phil Hawley, Brian O'Neill, Deborah Scraper, Linda Duckmanton, and Donna Ulrich. There are 3 people I need to thank for the many years I was at Ralston School. I had 2 excellent secretaries I worked with. First, Marilyn McIntyre. She was old school, as they say, a little rough around the edges, but ran a tight ship and made sure I knew what to do. It was a sad day when we closed the school for her funeral. A more loyal employee I would never know. Sandy Williamson was an excellent teacher aide and taught just about every grade and subject. She always had a smile and was game to try and do anything. It was a sad day when we had to again close the school. Like any school, the brains of the operation is the secretary. Lorna McRae started as a teacher aide and then became the school secretary. She was the organizer. Okay, she was my organizer. She took care of much more than was actually in her job description, keeping track of all the money that came and went through the school accounts, to keeping track of all the projects I seemed to get involved with, like the Arts Festival or Science Expo. Could never have done most of these projects without her assistance. And if I was getting a little off track or not paying attention to important things, she knew how to bring me back on track. And then there were the support staff from central office. I worked with 5 superintendents in my years with the division: Doug Christensen, Bob Carter, Keith Jones, Doug Nichols, and now Brian Angelic. Keith Jones and I spent a few trips and weeks in Germany on various SCE trips. We got lost more than a few times in Europe. Again, these administrators allowed me a free hand to obtain my professional goals. Special mention to Wally Regier, who I worked with as a special education coordinator and a deputy superintendent. If ever I wanted to have a person in a difficult parent meeting, it was Wally. But most important are the students over the years that I have worked with and have made my career enjoyable. There are just way too many that I would have to thank, and I take a risk of missing a few because there are so many. If ever I was having a bad day, I just had to walk out into the hallway and some grade 1 or 2 student would come up and give me a hug. That was a good day. I remember one day when I was having a bad day, a group of grade 9 students came into my office. The 4 students sat down, put their feet up on my desk, and said, "Give us a name, Mr. Blemmings. We'll take care of him." From the baseball diamond to the badminton court to the classroom, I was fortunate to work with some great students. Thanks to Facebook, I still am able to see how things are unfolding for them. Topping one of the highlights of my career was having both sons, Mark and Chris, attending the school. We were driving partners for 5 years. Years that slipped away way too fast. So you will notice that nowhere do I talk about learning the 3 R's and curriculum. Yes, they learned this, but for most of the students, they had more to do outside of a book. Something no standardized test will ever measure, and yet measuring to be the direction that experts want to see us move towards. I had my own standardized test for being a successful teacher. If a student 20 years later might think of me and it would bring a smile to their face, then I had been a success. Whether I taught them to long divide or not, that really didn't matter. Oh, right, we're not supposed to teach that with a new curriculum. I lived for 3 basic principles when I was at Ralston. First, every student had a niche, whether it was sports, academics, or fine arts. Part of my obligation as a teacher or administrator is to help them find it. Second, school was a second home for our students. Make it an environment that they felt welcome and respected. This was particularly important for our military students, both Canadian and British. Many students only passed through our doors during their 2-year tours. Third, a school was a community, and as teachers, it wasn't our job to close our classroom doors. We had an obligation to make the school a better place. I believe that learning was a natural result of these 3 principles. As I sit back and see my career of 30-plus years, I am glad that I stumbled on the teaching profession while at the University of Lethbridge. There have been many challenges, rewards, and yes, some setbacks as well. But as in any career, it comes time to move on. When colleagues ask me what I will do in retirement, the answer is easy. Catch up on 30 years of putting things on hold and utilize the many skills I have learned as the AC Tech. Not to fear, there are years of projects to start and complete. Ah yes, 30 years does go by fast. Red Stain would always say, he's a real character. That's all I wanted to be called, a character. To me, that meant someone who didn't follow all the rules, looked at things a little differently, and knew how to have fun.
What do you think of Austin?